She had been observing him for days, and every new gesture, every twitch of his face, sent her curiosity into overdrive. From the way he sipped his coffee, tilting the mug just so, to how he adjusted his posture when someone entered the room, everything about him seemed fascinating, almost like a puzzle she had to solve. She carried her small, humming notebook everywhere, jotting down notes with precision, the alien script curling in neat, unfamiliar patterns. Today, she finally decided she could wait no longer. She had to ask. Directly. Her approach was as polite and deliberate as her species allowed, but when she opened her mouth and requested it, the words were blunt enough to make him nearly drop his mug. "I would like hands-on lessons regarding human male behavior," she said, her large, reflective eyes staring at him as if measuring the intensity of his reaction. There was no hesitation, no shyness. Just utter seriousness. He blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, unsure whether to laugh, protest, or call the authorities. "Hands-on lessons?" he managed finally, trying to keep his voice calm, though every instinct told him this was a line that could spiral out of control. "Yes," she said, nodding solemnly. "To study gestures, emotional cues, and physical interactions. I must fully comprehend them to understand your species. Will you assist?" He paused. On one hand, this was absurdly forward, borderline terrifying in its precision. On the other hand, the sheer audacity, the almost childlike seriousness in her eyes, made him curious. Sure, I guess," he said, attempting a casual tone that didn't match the pounding of his heart. "We can start with basic things. Maybe handshakes?" Her expression lit up, and she immediately began to position herself with geometric exactness, her body stiff and perfectly upright. "Very well," she said. "Let us commence the experiment." The first handshake was a catastrophe. She approached with a measured step, extending her hand in a perfect arc. He extended his, trying to match the movement, only to have her hand collide awkwardly with his in a rigid, robotic grasp. She held on for what felt like minutes, her eyes flicking to a small device strapped to her wrist. A beep. A series of numbers appeared, and she nodded vigorously. Duration, 3.7 seconds. Pressure, moderate but uneven. Thumb placement requires adjustment. He swallowed hard, trying to maintain composure while simultaneously feeling like a lab rat. Okay, maybe loosen up a little?" he suggested. Her eyes widened, as though he had suggested something physically impossible. "Loosen? Do you mean decrease precision? I must maintain consistency. Variation would corrupt the data." By the third attempt, she had adjusted her grip 8 times, analyzed the curvature of his fingers, and insisted he repeat the process for another 10 iterations to account for what she called emotional drift. Every misstep or tiny twitch was noted in her notebook with annotations and arrows pointing to diagrams of his hand, as if he were part of an alien anatomy textbook. The absurdity of the situation began to get under his skin in an unexpected way. He found himself laughing quietly at her seriousness, at the way she tilted her head, scrutinizing him like he was a particularly confusing insect. She did not laugh. She did not smile. She only continued her meticulous measurements, eyes darting between his fingers and her notes. Yet there was a subtle charm in the precision, a careful fascination that felt almost endearing. When he tried to adjust the position subtly, demonstrating a more natural handshake, she paused, lifting one delicate finger to the side. "Deviation detected," she said in a tone of absolute neutrality, though he noticed the faintest twitch in her lips that could have been amusement, or a glitch in her composure. "Explain your intent. Clarification is required." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, caught between bemusement and exasperation. "Humans sometimes adjust handshakes to make it more comfortable, to express friendliness. It's not just about the pressure and angle." Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully, scanning his face, as if parsing some hidden signal. "Fascinating. Adjustment for emotional expression. Must quantify." She immediately jotted down more notes, muttering under her breath about variables and coefficients, her tail, Yes, she had a small, prehensile tail, swishing in what could almost be interpreted as concentration. By the time they concluded the first session, he was exhausted in a strange, almost flustered way, and she was thrilled, her notebook brimming with data. She leaned back slightly, stretching, and announced with complete seriousness, "Next, we shall advance to hugs. I have read that this is a common human greeting gesture with emotional connotations." He froze, blinking at her, hands halfway to removing his coffee mug from his trembling grasp. "Hugs?" he asked, his voice a mixture of panic and reluctant anticipation. "Yes. Hands-on practice is essential for understanding. I will need full participation." His heart raced. He had expected curiosity, maybe questions, even awkward commentary, but this was a different level of involvement. He looked at her large, earnest eyes, at the meticulous way she had already documented their handshake debacle, and realized one thing: this was going to be absolute chaos, and somehow, he found himself looking forward to it. She adjusted her stance, apparently ready to execute her next experiment, with the same rigor she had shown before. He took a deep breath, bracing himself for what could only be described as an alien study in human intimacy. And in the back of his mind, amid the anxiety and absurdity, a strange, fluttering feeling of excitement began to settle in. Her seriousness, her attention to detail, and her total lack of embarrassment in front of him, it was disarming. And maybe, just maybe, he was curious about more than just the lessons themselves. She approached the next lesson with the same precise determination as the handshake exercise, only this time the stakes felt infinitely higher. Hugs, she had decided, were more than just physical gestures. They were a combination of emotional cues, spatial awareness, and, as she muttered while scanning his posture, subtle gravitational adjustments. He could only stare at her, unsure how to respond, as she straightened herself and indicated he should stand in the designated hug zone, which she had clearly measured and marked with tape on the floor. "Stand there," she commanded, pointing with deliberate precision. "I will observe and measure your response to human embrace." He tried to comply, but the sheer literalness of the situation made him want to laugh before panic set in. He placed his feet where she indicated, hands at his sides like some sort of unwilling participant in a physical experiment. She stepped closer, measuring the distance with a small retractable ruler she produced from a pocket in her tunic. "Distance optimal. Angle of approach, 43 degrees. Proceed." He raised an eyebrow. Proceed how?" She blinked slowly, tilting her head. "Hug, of course. Initiate the proper human embrace. I will adjust based on data collected in real time." With a resigned sigh, he extended his arms slightly, awkwardly attempting a casual hug. She stiffened immediately, measuring his posture as if he were some fragile, breakable model. The first collision of bodies was less than graceful. Her shoulders were rigid, his arms unsure of where to land, and somehow, in trying to maintain a perfect angle, she bounced backwards slightly, knocking over a stack of books on the floor. "Error detected," she announced, scribbling notes furiously. "Shoulder alignment off by 2.3 degrees. Emotional conveyance, insufficient. Repeat for statistical significance." He groaned, rubbing the back of his neck, but there was something irresistible about the way she treated this entire interaction with absolute sincerity. She did not laugh, she did not hesitate, she simply catalogued every minor misstep, every flinch, every slight wobble as if it were the most crucial data ever collected in the universe. "Your arms must be more relaxed," he suggested, trying to demonstrate a natural posture, but she immediately interrupted. "Relaxation decreases precision. Are you attempting to corrupt the experiment?" "No, I'm just... I don't know, showing how humans normally hug," he replied, feeling increasingly like he was negotiating with a very polite, very literal robot. Her head tilted again, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Fascinating. Informal deviation. Note, emotional intent present despite mechanical errors. Quantify intensity of contact." She produced a small device that looked suspiciously like a heart monitor, and held it against his chest while muttering about pulse irregularities. The next attempt was marginally better, but the improvements were comedic in themselves. She now held him slightly too tightly, her tail wrapping around his leg in an unintentional mimic of a human arm, and she bounced imperceptibly as she tried to measure his emotional compliance. Every small movement was accompanied by a note-taking frenzy, with diagrams, arrows, and numerical annotations filling her notebook in rapid succession. He started teasing her lightly, exaggerating a flinch here, a sigh there, to see how she would react. Her eyes flicked to him sharply, clearly analyzing each micro-expression, and he had to stifle a laugh at the serious concentration on her face. Despite the chaos, or maybe because of it, there was an undeniable chemistry building between them. Observation: male exhibits elevated heartbeat during prolonged contact, she murmured. Hypothesis: physical proximity induces emotional response. Please confirm. I think that's accurate, he stammered, trying not to groan from the awkwardness of it all. She nodded vigorously. Excellent. Let us continue. Variation 2, Side Hug Protocol. Adjust angles accordingly. Observe subtle differences. The side hug was, if anything, more catastrophic. She misjudged his width, pressed too firmly against his shoulder, and in an attempt to measure contact comfort, nudged him slightly off balance. He almost toppled into a chair, catching himself just in time, while she scribbled notes on the height and angle of his adjustment reflex. Human adaptation is rapid, she announced seriously, oblivious to the near disaster. Emotional signals appear stronger when balance is challenged. Fascinating correlation. By the fifth or sixth repetition, the room was a whirlwind of chaotic, yet somehow endearing, movement. Furniture was slightly askew, stray notes covered the floor, and both of them were laughing despite themselves. She did not laugh aloud. Her species considered such displays unscientific, but the faint twitch at the corners of her mouth betrayed her amusement. He realized, in the midst of the chaos, that he had been enjoying this far more than he expected. Every awkward movement, every hyperanalytical comment, every absurdly precise measurement created an intimacy that was impossible to replicate in normal life. She was learning, yes, but they were also connecting in a way that transcended mere physical gestures. Observation: prolonged physical contact appears to cause human to blush and laugh simultaneously, she noted, pausing to scribble furiously. Emotionally perplexing. Must investigate further. He smiled, shaking his head. Yeah, it's complicated. You might say it's human. Her eyes flicked up to meet his, and for a moment, there was an unspoken understanding, an acknowledgement of the growing bond between student and teacher, experiment and observer. The absurdity of the lessons, the hyperliteral analysis, the sheer chaos, it was working. They were connecting, learning, laughing, and somehow, wanting more. She stepped back, arms folded, tail still twitching with the faintest hint of satisfaction. Next, she said simply, we shall proceed to kisses. Data indicates that this is a critical interaction for emotional and social comprehension. Prepare yourself. He froze mid-breath, blinking at her. Kisses? He had survived handshakes and hugs, had been shoved, measured, and almost tripped over several times, and now this? His stomach flipped in a mixture of dread, anticipation, and something undeniably electric. And somehow, despite everything, he found himself smiling. He had no idea how the next lesson would unfold, but he knew one thing with certainty. It would be ridiculous, chaotic, and absolutely impossible to resist. She had clearly done extensive research, or at least thought she had, because the moment she mentioned kisses, he realized he had entered uncharted territory. Unlike handshakes or hugs, this interaction carried implications he wasn't prepared to explain, let alone demonstrate. Yet, there she stood, notebook in hand, eyes wide with the most earnest concentration he had ever seen, as if this were some critical exam he had no choice but to pass. Before we begin, she said, I must outline parameters. Duration, pressure, and angle must be recorded. Timing devices will be used. Emotional response must be documented. Are you ready? He swallowed, trying to seem nonchalant while his pulse skyrocketed. Sure, I guess. Let's go step by step. She nodded, immediately adopting what he could only describe as a scientific stance. Shoulders rigid, feet planted, tail coiled neatly behind her. Step 1: lip contact. Initiate minimal contact first, as baseline. Observe reaction. He tried to offer guidance, suggesting a gentle approach, but she immediately interrupted. Define gentle. Quantify. Human descriptors are insufficient. Before he could clarify, she leaned in and pecked him on the lips with such mechanical precision that he almost laughed out loud. His eyes widened, unsure whether to pull back or endure this bizarre experiment. She quickly stepped back, already scribbling notes, muttering about lip curvature, temperature gradients, and emotional resonance. Analysis. Initial contact produced slight blush, minor increase in heart rate. Repeat for accuracy, she declared. He groaned inwardly but complied, attempting to demonstrate a more natural motion. She leaned in again, but this time, she overcompensated, pressing a little too firmly, and he felt the faintest jolt of surprise at the contact. She stepped back, eyes scanning him for any hint of abnormal reaction. Data indicates elevated excitement. Interesting. Documented. Each repetition grew progressively more chaotic. She experimented with timing, sometimes holding the contact too long, sometimes too briefly, all while maintaining that unwaveringly serious demeanor. He couldn't help but notice the slight twitch in her tail whenever the emotional signal was strong. Every misstep, every flinch, every awkward pause was meticulously recorded in her notebook, diagrams filling page after page. He attempted to give subtle guidance, suggesting, maybe try tilting your head this way, and relax your lips slightly. But she took every instruction with an almost comical literalness, analyzing each adjustment as if it were a complex mathematical problem. Tilt confirmed. Adjustment optimal. Emotional output increased by 2.4%. He blinked at her, feeling simultaneously flustered and oddly proud. She wasn't just learning, she was adapting. Her intensity, her curiosity, her complete lack of self-consciousness made the entire situation feel absurd, yet strangely intimate. Every exaggerated, analytical movement brought them closer, the tension coiling like an invisible thread between them. By the fifth repetition, the room was a whirlwind of near misses and accidental intimacy. He stumbled slightly when she leaned too close. She swatted a stray pen off the desk while muttering about equipment interference. And yet there was laughter in the way their eyes met, small, quiet acknowledgement of shared chaos. She didn't laugh aloud, of course. That would be unscientific. But there was a soft warmth in her gaze, a subtle humanizing of her otherwise alien demeanor. Observation. Male exhibits combination of laughter and visible tension. Hypothesis. Human kisses provoke simultaneous fear and pleasure. Confirmed? She asked, tilting her head in that way that made him forget how ridiculous this all was. Yes, he admitted, shaking his head, a nervous smile tugging at his lips. Confirmed. Her seriousness never wavered, yet something had changed. She seemed softer somehow, less like an experimenter and more like a participant in something entirely unfamiliar yet thrilling. She leaned in again, this time letting him guide the pace slightly, and for the first time, their lips met in a gesture that wasn't measured, timed, or charted. It was tentative, experimental, and deliciously human in its imperfection. He could feel her studying every micro-expression, every slight shift of his body, yet there was also an unmistakable curiosity that had grown into desire. She pulled back slightly, notebook clutched against her chest, eyes searching his for approval, for understanding, for a signal that he was enjoying the interaction as much as she was. He swallowed hard, hammering. You're doing great, he said, voice low, almost breathless. Her tail flicked slightly, a tiny, almost imperceptible sign of satisfaction. Data indicates positive emotional response. Hypothesis. Kissing conveys affection and generates pleasure. Confirmed? Yes, he whispered, and the word carried more than scientific confirmation. it carried acknowledgement of the tension, the intimacy, and the growing connection between them. Encouraged, she tried a more elaborate experiment, attempting a prolonged emotional contact, which involved holding him a little closer, letting her hands brush against his shoulders, and focusing intently on his reactions. He felt the heat in his chest, the nervous thrill of her proximity, and the absurdity of the situation. Measuring kisses with charts and stopwatches only made it more intoxicating. At one point, she paused mid-motion, pen hovering over her notebook. Observation: male exhibits uneven breathing, elevated heartbeat, and persistent smile. Emotional intensity higher than expected. Note: must recalibrate parameters for next trial. He laughed softly, unable to hide it, and for the first time, she looked at him not with purely analytical eyes, but with something warmer, something curious and almost vulnerable. Your laughter, it is not expected, she said. Neither was this, he admitted. But I'm not complaining. She tilted her head, considering his words, and slowly, deliberately, she closed the final gap between them. This time, the kiss was less experiment, more exploration. Less protocol, more instinct. And as they stood there, tangled in awkward grace, measuring devices abandoned for the moment, he realized that all her meticulous study, all her literal analysis, had led them here, to a moment of genuine connection, messy, funny, and completely human. Even in the chaos, amid charts and timers, the absurdity and the hilarity, one thing was clear. The lessons weren't just about human males. They were about discovery, about trust, about laughter, and about the undeniable pull between two beings from completely different worlds who, against all logic, were starting to care for each other in ways neither could quantify. She stepped back, tail curling slightly with what could almost be interpreted as anticipation. The notebook had been crammed with charts, diagrams, and annotations, but somehow it felt less important now than the moment itself. The chaos of handshakes, hugs, and kisses had reached a peak, and yet she insisted they continue. We must complete the final, comprehensive hands-on lesson, she said, her voice unwavering. Integration of gestures, emotional cues, and physical contact is essential for full understanding of human male behavior. He swallowed hard, heart racing at the implications. Integration? He had survived handshakes, endured awkward hugs, and weathered multiple kiss experiments that had left him simultaneously flustered, amused, and oddly exhilarated. What could possibly come next? Yet when he looked at her, the earnest curiosity in her eyes made resistance feel impossible. All right, he said, attempting a calm tone he didn't feel. Let's do it. She moved closer, measuring distances with meticulous care, and indicated he should stand in the center of the room once more. Prepare for full contact protocol. Please maintain attentiveness and report any deviation in emotional state. He raised an eyebrow. Report? Yes. Observation is necessary. Data must be complete. He sighed, giving in to the absurdity, and prepared himself. What followed was a whirlwind of motion, hilarity, and unexpected intimacy. She initiated a handshake, immediately correcting his grip with the precision of a surgeon, then transitioned seamlessly into a hug, insisting he maintain exact posture angles as she adjusted her tail and shoulders for optimal alignment. Every misstep, every tiny flinch, every laugh was meticulously noted. Yet amidst the comedy of errors, there was a rhythm, a flow, that felt surprisingly natural. Her analytical commentary did not cease. Observation: male exhibits increased heartbeat when embrace extends beyond 5 seconds. Emotional response heightened with tactile variation. Note: laughter persists under mild distress. Fascinating. He could only laugh, half at her seriousness, half at the sheer ridiculousness of it all. You're really thorough, he said, voice breathless from laughter and something else, something warmer, deeper. She tilted her head, pen poised above the notebook. Thoroughness is vital. Accuracy must be maintained. Please continue to participate fully. And so he did. Their interaction became a complex dance of touches, corrections, and adjustments. Hands grazed shoulders, hugs wobbled slightly, and kisses alternated between experimental and instinctive. She was still analyzing every reaction, but there was a noticeable softening in her manner, less robotic precision, more genuine curiosity tinged with subtle affection. The funniest moments were often the smallest: a stray pencil knocked off the desk by her tail, an accidental bump into the chair as he tried to demonstrate natural movement, or the way her ears flicked with every unexpected sound. Each mishap brought laughter, and with every laugh, the tension between them grew, tangled with something more electric. He realized, mid-chaos, that the original purpose of these lessons, understanding human males, was long gone. They were learning each other, navigating the uncharted territory of physical closeness, emotional exposure, and mutual attraction. Her alien perspective made every ordinary gesture feel extraordinary, and he found himself leaning into the absurdity, savoring each flustered reaction and awkward moment. At one point, she paused, eyes scanning him carefully. Observation: male exhibits confusion, amusement, and arousal simultaneously. Emotional data indicates high engagement. Hypothesis: hands-on lesson is successful beyond predictive models. Please verify. Yes, he whispered, breathless, realizing how close they were. It's successful. Encouraged, she proceeded with the final integration of lessons, a combination of hand-holding, hugging, and kissing, all while monitoring his reactions. Timers beeped, pens scribbled, and charts fluttered across the floor as she flitted from measurement to measurement, yet there was a grace to the chaos now, a rhythm born of familiarity. Their movements became more fluid, less mechanical, until the room felt suspended in a private bubble of laughter, flustered glances, and shared warmth. He reached out instinctively, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, and she froze for a moment, clearly surprised by the unexpected human gesture. Then, as if deciding it was worth documenting, she smiled faintly, eyes crinkling in a way he had not seen before. Human males, she muttered softly, almost to herself, are illogical, unpredictable, and delightful. He chuckled, heart thudding in his chest. I think you're starting to understand us, he said, voice low. She tilted her head, studying him with those large, expressive eyes that had captivated him from the start. Perhaps, she admitted, voice softening, but I am learning more than I anticipated. Human interaction is enjoyable, even beyond scientific interest. The air between them shifted subtly, the tension of curiosity now mingled with mutual attraction. He reached for her hand, and she did not pull away. Fingers intertwined naturally, the small gesture carrying more intimacy than any of her charts or notes ever could. She leaned in, not with rigid protocol, but with a tentative trust, and kissed him gently, fully, this time with no stopwatch, no diagrams, no experiments, just the two of them, discovering the warmth of connection. They pulled back slightly, both breathing heavily, eyes locked in a shared, unspoken acknowledgement. Her tail brushed lightly against his leg, her fingers lingered in his, and he realized that all the chaos, all the literal lessons, had led them here, to a moment of laughter, intimacy, and understanding that was uniquely theirs. She scribbled a final note in her notebook, smiling faintly. Humans are delightfully illogical. Their males even more so. Conclusion: hands-on lessons are enjoyable. He laughed softly, shaking his head. And dangerous, he teased. Perhaps, she replied, tilting her head with a mock seriousness that made his heart ache in a new, unfamiliar way. But worth every miscalculation. And with that, the lesson ended, not with the rigid precision she had anticipated, but with laughter, closeness, and the undeniable spark of something entirely human, entirely alien, and entirely real.